Okay, hi, and welcome again to Investigator-Initiated Trials, the Roles and Responsibilities. I have over 30 years' experience in the drug and device industries, working in pharmaceutical, device, and CRO companies, and as a consultant to investigators. I'm currently operating a niche provider company by the name of the Freeman Group, and I have the opportunity in that capacity to consult with investigators conducting these initiated studies. This webinar is going to discuss investigator-initiated trials and highlight the important role that the investigator plays in this type of study, where this individual is both the investigator and the sponsor. This is the role that gets mixed up sometimes, the fact that they are the sponsor of the study. Often the investigator fulfills his or her role as the investigator, but not that of a sponsor. This often involves the lack of adequate monitoring, which can lead to multiple regulatory deficiencies. This is paramount for the safety of the subject, which is the main emphasis of the regulatory body. The United States would be the FDA. We will present a typical process today for running an investigator-initiated trial, and we will discuss the role and the responsibility of the investigator in these trials, highlighting the risk and provide suggestions for compliance. So let's look at today's objectives. What are we going to try to accomplish? That will be on the first slide. There are a number of handouts as well, which you can look at after class. I will flash them up as I discuss them briefly, but encourage you to look at them in more detail after the program. So the first objective we're going to do today is to define what one of these trials is. What is an investigator-initiated trial? We're going to talk about the applicable federal regulations for conducting these studies, including the sponsor and the investigator responsibilities, which are all going to be conducted by that investigator. We'll look at the steps that are involved in initiating an IIT with the sponsor, and we'll review the regulatory reporting requirements. The reporting requirements are usually the piece that gets mistaken, because the investigator normally would report things to a sponsor, and the sponsor would work with the FDA. On these studies, this investigator is both the investigator and sponsor, and therefore would have to communicate with the FDA directly. We're going to identify essential documents then, the trial master file that needs to be kept for this kind of study. And we're going to refer to the Drug Information Association Trial Master File Reference Model. This has been seen as the most appropriate one for investigator-initiated studies, so that they can remain audit-ready in the event that there has to be an inspection by the FDA. Some of those inspections are done during the course of the study, and some of them might be after the study has been completed. We're going to identify some approaches to minimize the risks, minimize those risks that are associated with these studies by avoiding the common pitfalls. We'll discuss where the most common issues have been, learning from existing warning letters of deficiencies, where the FDA has come in and inspected one of these studies and had some issues. These types of studies have grown tremendously in recent years. Without a lot of blockbusters out there, the thought leaders are coming up with some very good ideas and approaching the sponsors, whether it be drug companies or device companies, and requesting permission to conduct a small study. These are usually very small studies, often for publication, and not very often for marketing rights. Very commonly, these studies will be completed, and the results will be shared with the sponsor, who may then undertake a larger study in that population, and perhaps seek marketing application rights after their study has been conducted. So we need to make sure that this study has credibility if it's going to get used by a sponsor, or if it's going to be published in a peer-related journal. So we're going to look at a lot of issues that all these studies tend to raise. The first thing we need to remember is that the same type of deficiencies are generally seen, whether it be a pharmaceutical or a medical device grant study or an investigator-initiated study. The rules are going to apply the same. They're a little more relaxed in investigator-initiated studies because the regulatory agents know that the investigator does not have the resources that a major pharmaceutical or major medical device company would have. But there's really no light version, if you will, of the sponsor responsibilities. They still need to conduct the study appropriately to protect the safety of the patient. We're going to be discussing drug and device work today because they're very similar for these studies. When we look at the definition in the regulatory documentation of what is a sponsor investigator, the regulatory authorities for both drug and device studies define a sponsor investigator as an individual, an organization, or an institution assuming responsibilities for both initiating the study, conducting the study, managing that study, and for financial support of the study.